Your doctor probably told you brain fog during menopause is normal. What they didn't tell you is that normal doesn't mean unavoidable. There is a moment that so many women describe in almost exactly the same way. You walk into a room and you stop. You stand there, looking around, and you genuinely cannot remember why you came in. It was just a second ago. You had a clear intention. You were on your way somewhere with a purpose. And now it is completely gone, as if someone reached into your mind and quietly erased it before you could get there. And you laugh it off the first time, maybe the second time too. But somewhere around the fifth or sixth time it happens in a single week, you stop laughing. You start wondering. You start asking yourself a question that feels uncomfortable, a question you are not quite ready to say out loud yet. You start thinking, what is happening to me? And that question, quiet and private as it is, sits with millions of women during menopause every single day. Not because they are getting old, not because they are becoming forgetful in some permanent, irreversible way, but because something real and biological is happening inside the brain during this transition. Something that most doctors do not have time to explain in a 15-minute appointment. Something that most women never even hear about until they are already deep inside it, already struggling, already wondering if this is just who they are now. Because that is the part that nobody prepares you for. Everyone talks about hot flashes. Everyone talks about the changes in your body, the shifts in your cycle, the physical discomforts of menopause. But the mental side, the cognitive side, the quiet and disorienting experience of feeling like your mind no longer belongs to you the way it once did, that part is treated like a footnote. That part is dismissed. Women are told they are tired, stressed, getting older. They are handed pamphlets about sleep hygiene and told to reduce caffeine. And they walk out of those appointments still not understanding why they cannot hold a thought for more than 30 seconds, why conversations feel like they require twice the effort they used to, why they sit down to read something and realize they have read the same paragraph 3 times and still cannot tell you what it said. This is not laziness. This is not weakness. This is not a character flaw or a personality change or proof that you are somehow less sharp than you used to be. What you are experiencing has a name. It has a biological explanation. And understanding that explanation is the first step toward actually doing something about it. So let me walk you through what is really going on. Because once you understand the mechanism behind it, everything starts to make a different kind of sense. And more importantly, you start to see that there are real, research-backed things women are doing right now to support their brain during this transition. Things that do not require a prescription. Things that do not require you to simply accept that this is your new normal. During menopause, your body goes through one of the most significant hormonal shifts of your entire life. Estrogen and progesterone, 2 hormones that have been quietly doing enormous work inside your body and your brain for decades, begin to decline. And most people know this on some level. What most people do not know is exactly how much those hormones were doing for your brain specifically. Because estrogen, in particular, is deeply involved in how your brain communicates with itself. It plays a role in the production and activity of neurotransmitters, those chemical messengers that allow different parts of your brain to talk to each other quickly and efficiently. When estrogen was abundant, those conversations were happening at full speed. Now that it is declining, some of those conversations become slower, harder, more effortful. And that effort is what you feel as brain fog. That effort is what you experience as the mental fatigue that sets in before noon, as the difficulty tracking conversations, as the frustrating inability to find words you have known your entire life. But here is where it gets even more interesting and more important. Because estrogen is not the only player in this story. There is another hormone involved, one that most women going through menopause have never been told about, one that researchers are only recently beginning to understand as a central factor in why menopause feels so cognitively and emotionally overwhelming. That hormone is cortisol. Cortisol is your stress hormone. It is the hormone your body releases when it perceives a threat, when it feels pressure, when it is managing something difficult. In small amounts and at the right times, cortisol is useful. It helps you respond quickly. It sharpens your attention in moments of urgency. But when cortisol levels remain elevated over time, when your body is producing too much of it too consistently, it begins to cause serious problems. And one of the most significant things researchers have now discovered is that during menopause, as estrogen and progesterone begin to decline, cortisol levels in women begin to rise. Not because menopausal women are more stressed than other people, though the symptoms of menopause can certainly create stress, but because the hormonal changes of menopause itself appear to trigger an increase in cortisol production. And elevated cortisol does something particularly damaging to the brain. Research from some of the most respected institutions in the world has shown that chronically high cortisol levels are associated with reduced cognitive performance, difficulties with memory and concentration, and a measurable impact on the brain regions responsible for learning and recall. One study from the Framingham Heart Study found that higher circulating cortisol was linked to smaller brain volume and poorer memory performance. Other researchers have found that prolonged cortisol elevation may accelerate the very cognitive changes that women often chalk up to aging. This is not speculation. This is the kind of research being published in major peer-reviewed journals, and it is fundamentally changing how scientists think about menopause and the brain. So the picture becomes clearer. You have declining estrogen affecting how your brain communicates. You have rising cortisol affecting your brain's structure and memory function. You have disrupted sleep because menopause affects sleep quality significantly, and your brain depends on sleep to consolidate memories, clear out metabolic waste, and reset for the next day. And you have all of this happening simultaneously, often without any acknowledgement or support from the healthcare system, often with nothing more than a vague suggestion to drink more water and try to manage your stress. Speaking of water, let us talk about that for a moment. Because the advice to increase water intake during menopause is actually good advice. Hydration matters. Your body and brain need water to function. During menopause, the hormonal shifts can affect how your body regulates temperature and fluid balance, and staying hydrated helps with a range of symptoms. Many women start drinking more water during this time, expecting to feel sharper, more energized, more like themselves. And hydration does help. But here is what nobody explains. Hydration alone, plain water by itself, may not be enough to address the deeper cognitive challenges that menopause creates. Because the brain does not just need water, it needs a very specific set of conditions to function at its best. It needs certain minerals. It needs neurological support. It needs the cortisol system to be functioning in a healthy range. And water, on its own, cannot provide any of that. This is something that many women discover the hard way. They drink their 8 glasses a day. They do everything they are supposed to do, and they still walk into rooms and forget why. They still struggle to concentrate. They still feel that foggy, disconnected, mentally underwater sensation that no amount of hydration seems to touch. And that experience, that gap between effort and result, is one of the most demoralizing parts of going through menopause. Because you are trying. You are taking care of yourself. You are doing the things you have always been told to do, and it is still not enough. And nobody is explaining why. If you are at that point, if you are looking for a clearer understanding of what the brain actually needs during the menopause transition, and what some women are doing to support memory and focus naturally, there is a guide available in the first link in the description that walks through this in much more detail. It is worth reading before you assume that what you are experiencing is simply unavoidable. Now let us continue building this picture, because there is something else happening that is worth understanding deeply. And it has to do with a plant that has been used for thousands of years, that modern science has now examined in dozens of clinical trials, and that is quietly becoming one of the most talked about natural supports for cognitive function and stress resilience in the research community. That plant is ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is an ancient herb with roots in Ayurvedic medicine, one of the oldest systems of health and wellness in human history. For thousands of years, practitioners used it to help people build resilience, recover from exhaustion, and maintain mental clarity under pressure. And for a long time in the Western world, this was treated with skepticism. Ancient remedies were not always taken seriously by modern medicine. But something interesting has been happening over the last 2 decades. Researchers began studying ashwagandha with the same rigorous tools they apply to pharmaceutical compounds. Randomized controlled trials, placebo-controlled double-blind studies, peer-reviewed publications in respected scientific journals. And what they found has genuinely surprised people in the research community. Ashwagandha has demonstrated a measurable ability to support healthy cortisol levels in the human body. This is not a vague or metaphorical claim. Clinical trials have shown that specific, standardized forms of ashwagandha can produce a statistically significant reduction in cortisol output. One landmark study published in the Journal of the American Nutraceutical Association found that a particular standardized extract of ashwagandha produced cortisol-lowering effects that were dramatically more pronounced than placebo. The participants in that study reported improvements in energy, mood, concentration, and sleep quality. Not because ashwagandha is a stimulant, not because it artificially forces the brain into alertness, but because when the cortisol system is better regulated, the brain can finally do what it was designed to do. Think about what that means in the context of menopause. If one of the primary drivers of cognitive fog and mental fatigue during menopause is the elevation of cortisol, and if ashwagandha has a clinically demonstrated ability to support healthier cortisol levels, then the connection becomes logical and compelling. Women whose brains are struggling under the weight of chronically elevated cortisol may find that supporting the cortisol system allows their cognitive function to recover in meaningful ways. Not overnight, not as a miracle, but as the natural result of removing a significant source of biological interference. And researchers have gone further. They have looked at ashwagandha specifically in the context of cognitive function. Studies have examined its impact on memory, attention, processing speed, and mental clarity. A clinical trial published in the Journal of Dietary Supplements found that participants who took a standardized ashwagandha extract showed significant improvements in both immediate and general memory, as well as in executive function and processing speed, compared to those who received a placebo. Another study looked at its effects on stress and cognitive performance in adults under chronic stress, a population that mirrors in many ways what menopausal women experience with their elevated cortisol, and found meaningful improvements in cognitive performance alongside reductions in stress markers. What makes ashwagandha particularly interesting for women in menopause is that its effects on cortisol appear to create a kind of cascade of benefits. When cortisol is better regulated, sleep quality tends to improve because cortisol is deeply involved in the body's sleep-wake cycle. When cortisol is better regulated, the inflammatory responses that can worsen brain fog begin to calm. When cortisol is better regulated, the hormonal environment becomes more stable because chronically high cortisol actively interferes with the production and balance of estrogen and progesterone, making the hormonal chaos of menopause even more pronounced. Supporting cortisol, in other words, is not just about reducing stress. It is about creating the conditions that the brain and body need to find their footing during one of the most turbulent biological transitions of a woman's life. Now, the question of how women are incorporating ashwagandha into their daily routines is interesting, because one of the most common approaches is remarkably simple. Many women are adding it to their daily water routine, not in complex preparations, not in elaborate protocols, but as a straightforward daily habit, something small and manageable that fits into a life that is already demanding enough. The idea of adding something supportive to your daily water, something that goes beyond simple hydration, has gained a lot of attention among women who are navigating menopause and looking for natural, research-grounded ways to feel better. And the reports from women who have made this kind of change are striking. Not in a dramatic overnight transformation kind of way, but in the quieter, more meaningful way that real improvement tends to happen. Women describing that they began to notice they could hold a thought through an entire conversation without losing the thread. Women saying that they started finishing tasks they had started instead of drifting away from them midway through. Women reporting that the mental heaviness they had carried for months began to lift, gradually, in a way that felt sustainable rather than artificial. Women noticing that they were sleeping more soundly, waking up more rested, and facing the day with more of the mental energy they remembered having before menopause made everything feel so effortful. This is what it looks like when the brain gets the support it actually needs. Not a dramatic chemical intervention. Not a prescription that comes with a long list of side effects to manage. but the quiet, biological restoration that happens when you address the actual underlying factors rather than just the symptoms on the surface. And this is important to say clearly. Brain fog during menopause is not a permanent state. The brain is one of the most adaptable organs in the human body. Research in neuroscience has increasingly shown that the brain retains significant plasticity well into midlife and beyond. Its ability to change, adapt, and recover is far more robust than we once believed. The cognitive challenges of menopause are real, but they are not necessarily permanent. They are, in many cases, the result of specific biological conditions that can be meaningfully influenced. The cortisol elevation that is driving so much of the mental dysfunction can be addressed. The sleep disruption that is preventing the brain from resetting can be improved. The nutritional gaps that are leaving the brain without the support it needs can be filled. This is not wishful thinking. This is the direction that research is pointing, and it is the experience that a growing number of women are reporting as they begin to understand what their brain actually needs during this transition. Not just water. Not just sleep hygiene advice, not just the instruction to manage your stress without any real guidance on how, but targeted, research-backed support for the specific biological systems that menopause disrupts. There is also something worth naming about the emotional weight of all of this, because brain fog during menopause does not just affect your productivity or your memory. It affects your sense of self. There is something deeply unsettling about not being able to trust your own mind, about forgetting things you should remember, about feeling like you are operating at half capacity during a period of life when you have decades of experience, wisdom, and capability behind you. Women in their late 40s and 50s are often at a significant and powerful point in their lives. They are leading teams, raising families, building things, contributing in ways that matter. And to feel mentally compromised in the middle of all of that is not just frustrating. It is disorienting in a way that touches your identity. You start to wonder if this is who you are now, if the sharp, focused, capable version of yourself was somehow temporary, and this slower, foggier version is what you are left with. And that thought, private and persistent, causes a kind of quiet grief, a mourning for the mental ease that used to feel effortless, a longing for the days when you could walk into a room and remember exactly why you were there, when you could follow a complex conversation without effort, when you could read something once and retain it, when you could think clearly and trust that clarity. I want to say something directly to that feeling, because it deserves to be spoken to, not just explained away. What you are experiencing is real. The grief is real. The disorientation is real. And you are not imagining it. You are not exaggerating it. And you are most certainly not alone in it. Millions of women are navigating exactly this experience right now, in silence, assuming it is just something they have to endure. But the evidence suggests something different. The evidence suggests that this is not simply an inevitable and unchangeable feature of menopause. It is a signal. It is your brain communicating that the conditions it needs have shifted and that it could use some targeted support. And the women who are beginning to feel better, who are reporting clearer thinking and more reliable memory and more consistent mental energy, are not women who found some secret or stumbled onto a miracle. They are women who started understanding the biology of what was happening and made intentional, specific, evidence-informed choices about how to support their brain during this transition. That is available to you too. For women who want to explore this further, who want to understand more about what targeted hydration strategies and specific natural compounds like ashwagandha can do for cognitive function during menopause, there is a method explained in the pinned comment that goes deeper into how women are using these approaches to support focus, memory, and mental clarity. It is one of the most practically useful things I have come across for women navigating this specific challenge. Because here is what the research ultimately points toward. And here is what I want you to take away from everything we have covered here. The brain fog of menopause is not simply aging. It is not weakness. It is not permanent. It is a predictable biological response to a set of hormonal changes that can be understood and addressed. The cortisol elevation that science has now identified as a central driver of menopausal cognitive symptoms can be supported through specific, clinically studied interventions. The sleep disruption that compounds every cognitive challenge can be improved. The neurological environment of your brain can be nourished rather than depleted. Ashwagandha is one piece of that picture, and it is a piece that the research takes seriously. Thousands of years of traditional use, now backed by dozens of clinical trials, now being studied specifically in the context of cortisol, cognition, sleep, and the kinds of stress-related biological disruption that menopause creates. It is not a cure. Nothing is. But it is a genuine, evidence-grounded support for some of the specific mechanisms that are making the menopausal brain struggle. And that matters. That is worth knowing. That is worth taking seriously, rather than dismissing. What women are discovering quietly and gradually is that adding intentional, research-backed support to their daily routine, even something as simple as what goes into their water each morning, can begin to shift the experience of menopause in ways that feel meaningful. Not dramatic, not overnight, but real. The kind of real that you feel when a conversation stops requiring so much effort. The kind of real that you feel when you wake up and the fog has not yet descended before you have even finished your first cup of tea. The kind of real that you feel when you are in the middle of a task and you realize, with a small and quiet surprise, that you have been completely focused for the last 30 minutes without losing the thread once. That is what cognitive support during menopause can look like. That is what happens when the brain is given what it actually needs. Not a return to some idealized past, not a reversal of time, but a genuine restoration of function that allows you to be present, capable, and clear in the life you are living right now. Menopause is a transition. It is not a sentence. And your brain, with the right understanding and the right support, is far more capable of navigating that transition than the current conversation around menopause has led most women to believe. The research is moving in a direction that should give you genuine hope. The experiences of women who have made these changes should give you genuine reason to try. And the biology, finally being understood in its full complexity, gives you something even more valuable than hope. It gives you a direction. A real, specific, evidence-informed direction toward feeling like yourself again. You walked into this video wondering if what you have been experiencing is real. It is real. You wondered if there was something you could do about it. There is. You wondered if the sharp, focused, mentally present version of yourself was gone forever. She is not. She is simply waiting for the right conditions. And now you know a little more about what those conditions actually look like.